We're the Vinyl Verdict. Last week we were talking about the unreleased Straight Up version that was submitted to Apple and rejected. We thought we would do the same for Ass. That's a little more difficult because it's a lot more mysterious exactly which versions of these tracks were submitted. There was a listing of the proposed album that was in the Matavina book, but we don't know exactly, like there's never been a clearly identified acetate of exactly which versions of the songs were part of this. We thought we would do our best to recreate that by listening mostly to the earlier versions that were released on the remastered version as bonus tracks, and some of the circulating versions of the songs that we've also picked up over the years. So for context, what happened is right after Straight Up, Badfinger got in the studio with Todd Rundgren and recorded a couple more songs, and then they moved to producing themselves for a couple months. And that version was submitted to Apple on January 14th, 1973 and was rejected. And Apple recommended bringing Chris Thomas to polish up the tracks. In some cases it was additional overdubs or remixing, in other cases it was completely re-recording the songs and even, it seems like, canning some of the songs. Ass has a reputation of being kind of a muddier recording and a little more rock oriented. This first version was even more rock oriented and even fuzzier, so if anything they did polish it up compared to this. So the first track was Getaway, that actually kicked off the album, and it sounds pretty similar to the final take, at least from the bonus track version. There's no brass on it yet, and interestingly enough, this is the second unreleased Apple album that kicked off with a Joey song, because remember on Straight Up it was Suitcase. So again, it's like they went back and decided, maybe this doesn't make sense, and they replaced it with Apple in My Eye. And actually, every Badfinger album, from No Dice to Wish You Were Here, kicks off with a Pete Ham song. I realized. It's only these unreleased ones that ever put a Joey song first.
I thought about that. So. Yeah, it's guitarish, it's a Joey rocker, not produced to that level where, actually, as you say, even though Ass was considered muddy production and not the finest, it sounds like Mozart compared to some of these mixes, which are spontaneous and right off the cuff kind of, and for the most part strong rocking, and that's how Getaway hit my ears too when I heard it after all these years, just loving the basic rock of Joey's song, but it definitely is not as produced.
Second song is When I Say. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there's some extra guitar work and stuff, but there's an organ that I heard on it that's not in the final version, so they did remove that, or something was changed there.
There's several different versions of that that came out lately, and even when you heard it the first time on the album, the structure wasn't complex. It was just the beauty of it, the way it was built on, and the chords were constantly being amplified by different guitars and beautiful production. So it's a little taste of the ideas that germinates in Tommy's mind, and I don't mind it.
Apple in My Eye is the third track, so they're burying the Pete Ham, what we view as a bit of the symbol of just the cover and obviously the dynamic of the album, but it was fully written and it's the third track. No synth on it yet, less reverb. It's just the piano doing that main riff. The guitar's not doing it yet, which Joey would play on the final version, but it's all there for the most part.
Yeah, they merged whole, and as you see in the Japanese film, even when Pete's playing on that acoustic guitar, he's got it. That's the song. Again, not as produced up, not the big choral effect, and more of the piano following the notes down, and I love this because I love to see the different stages these went through. You can clearly see it on these Ass outtakes.
Fourth and fifth tracks I think are the same, which are The Winner and Blind L. I think those are in the same order as the final version. So The Winner, probably the most similar of any of them. I kind of doubt. I don't know if these were actually on the acetate submitted, but there's certainly earlier versions that have been released. And vocals are a little bit rougher. Didn't really notice anything. I think it's single tracked. Nothing else is too different on this outtake. Blind Owl, very different. I think this does seem like maybe this is before Chris Thomas got involved or before he fully polished it up. It starts with like an electric piano, but it sounds a lot smaller. It really has a band feel. It's much less produced, and the bongos that we're used to hearing at the end of the song are really throughout the whole thing. That really gives it an edge, I think, when you get to that final fade out, versus when the bongos are all the way through, those parts seem more connected, so it doesn't have that shock value at the end of the song that it did in the final version. The vocals also sound a lot more restrained, and they're harmonized basically throughout, which gives it a very different feel. And the ending, just that whole ending fade out thing, is much thinner. I think it just again shows that Chris Thomas really did wonders with this.
It's a smaller, lower key Tommy kind of unknowable mystique of some of his songs lyrically and just his ideas, and it sounds a little more like that. You can clearly see what was done when Chris Thomas came aboard, and how I would say, if for whatever combination of reasons, it became such a powerful ending. Well, you can really see the origin and the gestation of some of these things, which can start as acoustically little things, and how the group worked on them. The kind of the no matter what syndrome, how Pete's demo of that became that iconic Badfinger song. So I love Blind Owl on this too, but it is notably more different, I would say, than the others.
And then that does not end side one. We have Do You Mind, which ends side one. And this is probably the most interesting unreleased song potentially in the whole Badfinger catalog, because they put so much work into this. There's at least like 4 different versions circulating, probably more, including there's a piano version that has a double guitar solo. There's obviously, there's a version that has a deep guitar solo, one that's doing more chords during that solo. So a lot of different versions. One of them, I know we talked about it, it might be a 1990s remix. It's not really clear which one of these was put forward as the final product. Obviously, one of them was included as a bonus track on the Ass remaster. Similar to Apple My Eye in some ways, and it's got that acoustic kind of ballad with the descending riff in it a lot, and just beautiful harmonies and sentiment in it. It has a lot of their signature sounds in it. It also has like Mike Gibbons doing these big drum fills, like sweeping across the toms that sound a lot like Day After Day.
This seemed like a level that they could have even done more with. Do You Mind is great songwriting, and I would like to know more about it, why and how it just became not considered for the album.
So that's the end of side one, and then we flip it over, and the proposed side two starts with Piano Red, which is a pretty weird way to kick off a side. I mean, it sounds unlike any other Pete Ham song ever. He's clearly doing, a vocal impersonation of Piano Red, who I guess was like a 3-fingered guy at a bar in the US that a lot of musicians fell in love with. And this song, follows that. It's 3-chord blues, kind of doing this one riff over and over again in different places, and there's another guitar in stereo doing like a funk riff. It lets Pete break out the harmonica solo, which had been rejected from a lot of other songs, and I guess it would be rejected here as well. I definitely prefer the version with there's a solo version that Pete Ham recorded as a home demo. It's much slower, it's much longer, and he's playing slide guitar on it, and that version probably is not ready to be put on a Badfinger album, but it captures the spirit of the song a little bit more. And I actually wonder, because January 73 is when it's, unverified that he may have been in some of the Living in the Material World sessions with George Harrison. And the way that this is produced on his home demo sounds a lot like the Sue Me Sue You Blues bottleneck slide guitar. He wasn't on any of the final versions of those songs, but maybe he did stop in the studio, and clearly there was this resurgence of blues in pop music around that time, and if that was really influencing him and pushing him to write, I won't say throwaway songs, but definitely novelty songs, let him play more blues.
Yeah, you wonder when they're working on a song like that, is that done for serious consideration to go on the album, or do they have these from a more casual, fun in the studio kind of approach? Or?
There's a lot of other songs he was writing around this time. Why is this the one he recorded with Badfinger? The next track is Cowboy. We don't really have an earlier version of this. We have the Welsh demos that Mike Gibbons recorded, as well as a couple other songs that he recorded it when he went in Wales with a couple musicians when he left Badfinger. Ironically, these demos actually sound more country-ish and more like a band than the final product. Then the next song is Regular, which is Joey Mullen's kind of joke song, and there's no way these mixes were final. Like listening to this one, and we have 2 different versions of it. But he's clearly talking to like the PA system in the song. So I don't know what's going on, and if there was a more final version. But for as far as novelty songs go, I like it. It's got a cool bass riff. It's got slashing chords that they're known for. I like his slurred speech in it. It's pretty funny. It works with the song.
I don't think he was necessarily acting in all of that.
Yeah, well, I think he played the part. It's method acting, right? And they got the old-timey bar piano doing the solo in it, and the ending, obviously, where they're kind of exaggerating all the harmonies, like everyone in the bar is singing it. So he really leaned into that novelty, and the lead guitar playing is still really good. So there is a moment where it is Chris Badfinger, and Joey kind of does this more of like a cartoonish solo, and then Pete Ham comes in and does the double guitar solo on top of it that's much more melodic. This would have been a great B-side, I think, if you were buying like a 45 and this was like, the rare version Apple My Eye with Regular on the B-side or something like that. But yeah, I mean, they would shelve it and Badfinger didn't really ever do that. They didn't have B-sides that weren't on albums, so other than the Ivy's early stuff.
You just wonder when they're writing songs like Regular, which I've always loved, which is a real kick to hear, which is, Joey's irrepressible humor and personality at that time, and his musical ability. And when it came out years later, it was a riot to hear. Was it written to be on this album?
The next song is I Can Love You, which is one of the ones that they recorded with Todd Rundgren, but it was rejected, I think, because specifically the synth or something they said was buzzing too much at the end of it. So I don't know that we have that version, but we have an earlier outtake that was included on the remaster, and his voice definitely sounds buried in all his synth, so I think that one was more of a remix. And then still, similar to the final version, the album ends with Timeless. And we don't know which version was included. I think the closest is the demo version that was included on here. The flute's still in there. It ends at about 5.5 minutes. Pete Ham seems less confident in the ending solo. It's just sort of following the progression, exploring it a little bit, and then ending with that alien kind of synth pad much earlier and without all of the virtuoso playing that he would add in later on. But it seems like he had the idea still of ending the album with that and having a little bit of an extended outro. It definitely doesn't have the same resonance as the final.
When you listen to this, in fact, it gives you cause to pause and reflect about just how magnificent the Timeless playing was as it finally emerged. And as you say, he's blocking it out.
And again, this might have been an earlier version. I don't know which one was actually submitted to Apple, but notably, there are also 3 demos from this time period that were not included on the album. So Rock and Roll, that Tom Evans song where, it's basically no good at all, but a year or two later, another rejected screamer from Tom Evans. I don't know why that one wasn't included on here. Coppertone Blues. Pete's writing is in a weird place between that and Piano Red for both of these to be, recorded with the band, and Coppertone Blues also has a solo version that he did in a demo form. And then Dreaming, which seems divisive. People don't like it out there. I think it's one of Joey's best songs. I love it. Yeah, it's a little extended, but the guitar playing in there and just the general kind of stream of consciousness lyrics are great in there. And it's got some of Pete's best harmonica playing. So I don't know what the story is with those 3 demos either, but this is the original version that was submitted, at least the track listing of it. And compared to Straight Up, it does seem a lot closer to the final product in a lot of ways, even if we don't have the exact production. But I feel like they were rejecting it. Well, I guess it is clear. They were rejecting the production of this earlier version of Ass. And that's why they brought in Chris Thomas. In the case of Straight Up, they were rejecting some of the actual songs, it feels like.
Well, a little bit of both maybe on this, but it sure is loaded with songs when you think of it. I think the final Ass had 10 songs.
Yeah. No Constitution yet.
That's right. No Icicles,
But mostly there.
Trying different production ideas, I think without exception, every one of which was amplified on and expanded on and improved when they did release Ass. But this sure, for a Badfinger fan, is a fun thing to listen to.
But this is definitely a missing piece in the history. For an album they spent, over a year recording and working with, basically 2 different producers and trying to self-produce. I would love to get some confirmation on what were the mixes submitted and get that released someday just like we have for Straight Up. So let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.